You could pull that up for me, Nick. Remember what the message was last week? Are we in the end times? That was my specific message last week. Are we in the end times? And, checking biblically first, and then historically, if the time in which we live matches up with what the Bible talks about. And at the end of the message, I said this. I said, it sure looks like it. However, it could just be one of those intense contractions right before the end times. Because we know, biblically, it says it's like contractions, birth pains. And it comes and then it releases. It comes and it releases. And so one of the last things I said is it sure looks like we're in the end times. However, it could be in just one of the more intense contractions leading up to it. Okay? So you all remember that? Well, those of you that were here. Okay. On Monday, Rick Joyner released this word. This morning, the Lord said to me something I don't ever recall him saying before so specifically, that we really are coming to the end of this age. He has been speaking to me about the coming troubles and the testing of our faith, but as an encouragement. Peter wrote that the testing of our faith is more valuable than gold, and this is how we need to look at them. We are entering the greatest time of trouble there has ever been on the earth, but also the greatest revelation of his glory. It is a great privilege to be alive at this time, and though it will be hard, it will be worth it. So on Sunday, my message question was, are we in the end times? Looked at the theology and the history to figure out that, yeah, probably, if not one of the more intense contractions right before the end time. And on Monday, and I saw it on Tuesday, this word from Rick Joyner, that he believes the Lord has showed him that we are in the end times. Now, by the way, how long is the end times? Who knows? Okay, a lot of times in these transitional periods, time goes. I mean, if you think about, for Israel, they were in their end time, the end time of God's economy with them, and then it was switching to the Christian church. Doesn't mean he switched totally away from Israel. I'm not into supersessionism, where the church replaces Israel. There's still a promise for Israel, and of course that has started to come true since 1948 for sure. Jesus said that the times of the Gentiles would eventually be fulfilled, and you would know that when Jerusalem was stopped being trampled underfoot by Gentiles, and that happened in 1967. So I understand. I know the signs of the times. I don't think you have to be a genius to figure that out. However, as we look at the signs of the times and we look at what's going on in the world around us, we know that we are at the cusp of that, and we need to recognize it, and we need to say, hey, how do we respond now? How do we, as God's people, respond if we are truly in the end times? Not just in one of the last contractions before the end time, but if we are actually in the end time. And when I saw this on Tuesday, I said, wow, now I need to do a follow-up message. Because I wasn't just posing the question, are we in the end times? And answering it, yeah, probably. But now the apostolic head of our ministry stream is, and I mean, he kind of shares that with Chris Reed now, but he really is still the chairman of the board, has stated, yes, that he believes the Lord has showed him. We are definitely in end times, and it's an exciting time to be alive. And it's nothing for us to be afraid of. In fact, Jesus said, lift up your head, your redemption is drawing nigh when these things begin to take place. Now, he was talking specifically at his time to what was going on in Jerusalem, because for them, it was the end of their era. And it was also a prophecy of what it would be like at the end of our era. If you look at Matthew 24, it's pretty apparent. Matthew 24 was speaking about the destruction of Jerusalem right up until verse 35. But the things in Matthew chapter 24 were definitely what we'd call double fulfillment prophecy. Looking ahead to another age that would end and the intensity of what would happen in those ages. So, anyway, based upon all this, I've got this simple question. Well, not question. I changed it from a question to a statement, how Christians are to act in the end times. Because the Bible talks about that. See, there are statements in James but written by James, and in Peter, and in wherever else we're going today. Peter and Timothy, written by Paul. So we are going to talk about this. First, I want to put up a comic that was in the paper today, this morning, in the Sun Sentinel, because the Lord loves me and he puts stuff in the comics for me once in a while. The end of the world is near, very near, remarkably close, in the vicinity, surprisingly improving. All is well, carry on. Well, that's the message. All is well, carry on, but we're right there. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, John's taking a picture of it. That was in this morning's paper. That's all I need to say today. I think we're done. Isn't that amazing? I'm going to have to post that a few places. There's just, okay. Anyway. So, let's look at, starting with 2 Timothy 3. We're looking at 2 Timothy 3, 1-5. If you open up your Bibles to 2 Timothy chapter 3, of course, I'll also be projecting my translation of it. Paul says, I jumped ahead of myself. Back up, don't read that. Okay. But know this, that in the last days there will be dangerous times. Wow, does that speak, right? Know this, that in the last days there will be dangerous times. Paul is looking ahead to the last days, and he says there's going to be some danger in the area. He warns, some translations say perilous times or difficult times or stressful times, whatever it is, all of it communicates the same thing. I like the word dangerous because the word means dangerous, so I like to use the meaning of the word. I mean, it has other meanings too, but I like that particular meaning because if there are people who are really messed up, it's dangerous. We've got messed up people all around us, and they are dangerous to people. I mean, that's the way it is, and it doesn't matter if they're in government or if they're just someone on the street who's a little bit out of their mind. They're dangerous, and that is something we need to be aware of. People do strange things, okay, and we need to be aware that we need God's protection so that those strange things don't happen to us or to our loved ones. If we're living in the end times, we need to be praying more protection on our own person and on the person of those that we love and those that are significant to us. So Paul's looking ahead to the last days, and he warns his readers about the dangerous times, the hard times that are coming upon them. And he's letting them know, hey, know that when the last days are here. Now remember, Paul's writing to Timothy here, Pastor Timothy, he's in Ephesus, and he's saying, hey, there's some things. They were in the end times of God's economy with Israel. And it was shifting to the new times or the new age where God would be dealing mostly with the Gentiles for a season. And then, obviously, we are now in the end times again. When there's a change of economy, and there is to the millennium, there's going to be these same patterns. Hard times, dangerous times, difficult times. For men will be self-centered, lovers of wealth, boastful, proud, slanderous, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy. Now, we're not even through this list yet, but I had to stop to take a breath. Actually, it's really how many of these can fit into one screen. Okay, so I was able to make all of these things fit on this screen. So, men will be self-centered. Those who live at the time, self-centered. You know what that means? It means their own good is more important than your good or anyone else's good. Boy, does that describe us today. Okay? It's like, I've got this great idea. I got this idea. I've got this really good idea. I think we should do gain-of-function research on this virus and see what happens. That's self-centered. That's about as self-centered as you can get. Gain of function means making it more communicable so that it moves from person to person. And that's exactly what was happening in the Wuhan lab. That might get us a strike on. It's true. I mean, I understand it's all out in the news. I mean, it's everywhere, but that doesn't mean that certain platforms allow you to do that. But anyway, it's truth. Self-centeredness moves us to say, hey, I'm going to do it this way, even though it could impact a lot of people negatively. I'm going to allow lawlessness to keep going, even though it can impact a lot of people negatively, because I've got a political agenda. So we're seeing the results of that, the self-centeredness. We've got a political agenda. We're going to focus on that no matter what it costs to Joe Average living in the United States right now. And I could get really much more specific and mention specific examples, but I won't, because if you read the paper, you know very well what I'm talking about. They'll be lovers of wealth. Wow. That's really true. You can buy just about anybody nowadays. Literally, you have to be someone who has to make that determination. I will never be bought. Because if you don't make that determination, especially if you're in political power, you will be bought, because the amounts of money that are available would buy anybody that could be bought. Okay, it's just the way it is. The issue is, if you can be bought, it just means your price tag is what has to be determined. And that happens all of the time. You wonder, why did people who were good people suddenly get to a point and they seem like they've absolutely flipped a switch? Be wise. Understand, we're living in an age where people are lovers of wealth. Now, there's a specific application of this in James, and that's why I mentioned the book of James earlier, because James is talking about his era, the last age that they lived in, or the end of the age that they lived in, and this is what he says to the wealthy. Your gold and silver are tarnished, and their tarnish will be a testimony against you that will consume your flesh like fire. You have treasured up wealth in the last days. Okay, now, that's James saying it's a foolish thing to treasure up wealth in the last days. Why? Because it's about to be worthless. I already told you at the MFM retreat, the Lord was challenging me to give personally far more than I'd ever given before in one retreat. And I was thinking, I'm going to need some real clarification on this. And no kidding, this is what he dropped into my spirit. It's not going to be worth anything by the next time. And I don't mean worth anything, but it's going to be not nearly the amount of seed that you can buy today. There's going to be so much less that you'll be able to buy the next time you come together at an MFM retreat. Okay, so he showed me there'd be some real devaluation of the dollar between now and next year. And I realized this is the best time to give, when it's actually worth something. And because when you're in an end-time scenario, you are going to see your economy go through some real issues. Now, the best thing I can, as far as modern terms, we can see this happening. There was a very prophetic movie released years ago. I'm not recommending it because there's some pretty objectionable scenes in it. But Schindler's List. And in Schindler's List, there was a particular, obviously they were moving to total disillusion of the Deutschmark and everything in Germany. It was just all crashing and burning, which means the money was going to be worth nothing. This was the closing scene of Schindler's List, as this man who saved 1,100 Jewish lives by basically bribing German officials to let them come to work at his factory. He spent his own money. Listen to what he was saying at the end. And this is a movie, this is a dramatization, but it probably reflected his heart, the heart of the original man. So I'm going to play that clip.
I could have got more. I could have got more. I don't know if I just... I could have got more.
Oscar, there are 1,100 people who are alive because of you. Look at them.
If I'd made more money... I threw away so much money. You have no idea. If I just...
There will be generations because of what you did.
I didn't do enough.
You did wanted so much.
This car. Kurt would have bought this car. Why did I keep the car? 10 people right there. 10 people. 10 more people. This pin. 2 people. This is gold. 2 more people. You would have given me 2 for it. At least 1. You would have given me 1. 1 more. 1 more person. Person stand. For this. I could have got 1 more person. And I didn't. I didn't.
There's a man coming to grips with the idea that he had used his wealth appropriately, but he could not he could not deal with the fact that he'd used so much of it inappropriately. James is confronting the wealthy Christians of his age and saying, you hoarded wealth in the last days. By the way, when you hoard wealth in the last days, it becomes worthless. Because, why? It's the last days. Now, it's interesting to me that the first thing we ask, and I'm not against people preparing for the days in which we live. I think it's incumbent on us to prepare for the days in which we live. That we do not become a burden on others if by any way we can avoid that. However, I also know that there's a difference between preparing and hoarding. And as I was sitting at that MFM retreat, the Lord was showing me, I've given you a lot to prepare with. And so you need to step up a little bit. And that was, to me, one of the signs that we are a lot closer to the end times than I understood. And that, or at least to the $50 dream that Chris Reed had, which talks about the devaluation of the dollar. So it makes sense to me that in the book of James, chapter 5, verse 3, he confronts the wealthy and says, you are hoarding wealth in the last days. Now that means for us that as we think about the positions in which we find ourselves, preparation is appropriate. But there gets to be a place where if we're putting our trust in wealth, that's hoarding. Because our hope always has to be in the Lord. You know, the Lord showed me once, he actually did this thing where he said, I need you to pray for a bird. I'll send a bird if you pray for one. So I said, well, Lord, this is when we're in our location now. I said, well, Lord, of course, if I'm going to pray a bird, I'm going to pray an eagle. And then when I thought about it, I said, hey, Lord, I'm an eagle. I said, whoa, no, not an eagle, Lord. There's all sorts of foo-foo dogs around here. I said, let's give them a running chance at least. Send only a hawk. I changed my prayer quickly based upon my love for my neighbors. And so anyway, within about a week, I'm outside on our back porch, and all of a sudden I hear a rustling in the palm tree right above the house. This is bizarre, right outside the patio. And there's a rustling up there. I'm going, what's up there? And a hawk takes off from the palm tree and circles 5 times over the canal and back and around, going by me every time. And you understand that's odd behavior anyway. But in his talons, he was holding onto a fish. And I was watching that. And I know the Lord had wanted to give me a message through the bird. You know, if you ask for a bird, I'll give you a message. And I looked at the fish, and this is what I knew the Lord was saying. If you ever have need, I'll send birds with fish. That seems like it's biblical, right? The raven and Elijah. Okay, and so I knew what the Lord was saying. You don't have to worry about your provision. By the way, do I make sure that I am a responsible, sane, sober citizen? And I am prepared, if I need to be, for things to go bad, at least to some level. I mean, I'm not independently wealthy, but I certainly do understand what it means to prepare without hoarding. And so, like I said, we got tons of spam here if you ever get hungry. Some of you say I'd have to get really hungry for spam. But some people like spam. I haven't had spam in a lot of years. Oh. There's really good spam recipes, Dawn is saying. She hasn't made any of them in our entire marriage. Thank God. So, okay, and then let's go on with that. So it's boastful, proud. So we got boastful and proud, kind of the same idea. It's like that you're pride, so you boast. Okay, and that's a big deal in the cultures in which we live. People are focused on how great they are. Just listen to any politician. Slanderous, boy, that's everywhere. Slander. By the way, the root of this word is diabolos, which is the devil. And whenever I call it, in my new translation, I translate it the accuser. So they are slanderous. I mean, I translate it when it's a substantive, the accuser. But that's what it is one who slanders. Accusing before the throne of God as much as they can. Disobedient to parents. Isn't that interesting that makes the list? However, disobedience to parents is talking about a general principle about disobedience in general. If you disobey your parents, you'll disobey authorities. You'll just be disobedient. And, that's why that's in the list. It's not just, it starts with the parents and the recalcitrance. By the way, I was reading one of the commentators who probably wrote his commentary back in the 70s and maybe 80s, but said something to the effect, you can see that more than ever today. If he wrote that back in the 80s, oh my goodness. Things have changed a little bit since then. Ungrateful. Wow. Ungrateful. That's what you hear at the universities when you have all these protesters for whatever it is. They're totally ungrateful. By the way, whenever they attack our forefathers in the United States, they're ungrateful for what they've been given by their work and sweat equity. By the way, our forefathers and our parents aren't perfect. That's not why we honor them. They're not perfect, but they sweat. They didn't do it right all the time. But they worked hard to give something better to their children. And we forgive them for the things that they are unable to, or they were just a part of their culture. And unholy, that just means unholy. Okay? They invent ways to do evil, is what Paul says when he describes this in a different way. Verses 3 and 4, the list goes on. Unloving, unwilling to reconcile with others, accusers, without self-control, untamed, haters of the good, betrayers, thoughtless, swollen with conceit, and lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. So this is still a whole list. Unloving, that just means, guess what? They're unloving. By the way, love is sacrificial in nature, not willing to sacrifice on behalf of other people. That's unloving. Okay. Unwilling to reconcile. How many people do you know? I'll never forgive that person. I'll never reconcile with them. That's the spirit of this age. If someone's saying that, it means they're under the influence of the spirit of this age. And what you do is to get them out of it, you slap them. No, I'm kidding. Don't ever do that. I'll never reconcile. You know that meme that shows Batman slapping Robin? Don't ever say that. Whatever they throw in, whatever's in the meme. So unwilling to reconcile. Do not take the violence into your hands. But it's a spirit of this age thing. They're not thinking. They're on understanding. When we pray the Lord's Prayer, it's forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. A lot of you like trespasses better, but I like debts and debtor better. But anyway, there's this unwillingness to forgive, to reconcile, to make it right. As far as it's up to you, live at peace with all men. That's what Paul tells us. Live at peace with everyone, if it's possible. Here's the accuser's word. The last one was blasphemao. That was slanderous, where you slander other people. This is the one that is diabolos, accusers. And it means, this is where you could say with the substantive, you could say The accuser is the one who is behind those who accuse. And that always happens. By the way, you always have something that someone can accuse you for, rightly or wrongly. You're always open to being accused. Why? Because they can make stuff up. That happens all the time. Or you can actually have something they find out about, something that's under the blood, forgiven. And people can still accuse you. Sometimes it's your closest friends or relatives. And you have to make sure that, hey, by the way, if you are the one who has that accusation, you know, the old standby is the husband or the wife that goes down the list of all the things that the husband or wife has done in the past. Boom, you did this, and that's 15 years ago, and this, and this, and this, and this. And that's all accusation. That stuff should have been forgiven long ago. Unwilling to reconcile. We need to reconcile. We need not to be accusers. That's why those two things are together. Without self-control. Ooh, man, we need self-control. If you don't have self-control, you do all sorts of dumb things. Some people watch police body cams for entertainment. Seriously, I mean, they do. You can look up Snowflake's police body cams or something like that. And it will show you a whole generation that when they're pulled over by police, they go into a tantrum. They can't believe that they're finally being held accountable for something. And there are people that watch this stuff over and over. I mean, it just goes on and on because it's body cam footage is public record. And so it goes on and on. But what it shows is that people have no self-control. They're like major, you don't have any ability to, well, when you get stopped, if you ignore a direct order of a police officer, they have the ability to reach into that car and to pull you out by force. Not just the ability, the right. Okay? The laws are written so that can be done. And if you don't have the self-control to say, yes, sir, no, sir, because when a police officer pulls you over, they're hoping to go home at the end of the shift. They want you to behave in a certain way so that they can go home at the end of a shift. They want you to leave too with a ticket in your hand or whatever, but they do not want to have a confrontation. And all you need is a little self-control. But if you don't have self-control, you're going to find yourself face down on the ground with handcuffs on the back of you. And that's probably the best case scenario. You might be on the end of a taser. Boy, that would not be a fun day. Okay, that would be just, I was sitting there like this going, get those hands out from behind you. So, okay, I don't want to make it sound like I've ever had that, Okay, anyway, okay. Without we have to be people who are practicing self-control. And by the way, that's more true today than ever because it'd be easy to get into panic. And once you get into panic, you lose self-control. And we can't go there. Untamed, isn't that an interesting word? They haven't been broken. And I don't mean broken in the sense of, that they no longer work. They haven't been broken like what happens when you tame a horse. Because taming a horse or breaking a horse is you are breaking them to your will. We need to be broken to God's will. We need to be people who are tame because God has done something in our character and life. And if we're untamed, unbroken, we are a mess. And that means if we're not willing to submit to God, chances are we're not willing to submit to our culture, and life is going to be a little hairy. It's just going to be the way it is. We need to be those who are tame. Otherwise, we will be, we'll end up in things we shouldn't be in. Haters of the good. I'm trying to figure out a way to say this nicely. If you hate that there are restrictions on abortion, you're a hater of the good. Everyone, every single person that talks about it publicly, except some rather insane people, will say, the guys that are absolutely pro-choice, we want to make it safe, legal, and rare. Because it's not a good thing. And if you are against any restrictions, like someone we heard about on Thursday night, you're a hater of the good. It's a good thing. And again, both sides of the debate recognize that, except for a man who was on stage on Thursday night. Betrayers. Yeah, that almost needs to go without that. It doesn't need much comment. People betray people, and we want to make sure we don't do that to each other. Thoughtless. Now, we can have thoughtless betrayals. Someone that gives you a secret, and then thoughtlessly you let it out, and you see the words going, it's too late. Don't be thoughtless. Think of people. Don't be thoughtless. Swollen with conceit. That's a picture. And if you're conceited, if you're swollen with conceit, it's going to hurt your vision. You're not going to be able to see your shoes so you don't stumble over things. That's the picture of swollen. And you're not going to be able, you stumble because God opposes the proud. Okay? And lovers of pleasure, not God. This is actually a play on words because they start out with that Greek word phileo. Okay? Lover. And deep affection. So they would rather love or have affection for pleasure than God. So it uses this, phileo is two, but then it ends. These are a little different. So it's people that would rather be involved in pleasure than they would in worshiping God. I was just watching Joel's message from 1 Thessalonians chapter 1 when I was gone. And in 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, he talks about the idols that we have, modern day idols. We don't have a lot of people, at least in our culture, bowing down to wood and that sort of stuff. It does happen. It is around, but it's not generally what we'd run into. But then he talks about all the things that we put in front of God. And all those things a lot of those things are our pleasures, what we enjoy, and those go first rather than God. And we need to discipline ourselves so that we are, and as Christians, we got the ability to, because we got the Holy Spirit. We can say, Lord, help me never to put my pleasure ahead of you. And God answers that prayer. That's humility to ask. Okay, verse 5. They will have an appearance of godliness, but they will deny its power. Keep away from these men. Do you know what he gets down to there? He says, I'm talking about people that look like good Christians. That's what he's saying. He says they'll have an appearance of godliness. Okay, that means they'll look pretty good. They appear as if they're one of us, but the truth is they deny all of its power to change them or to change the world. And so he's got a bottom line on that. Stay away from them. Okay? Stay away from them. Do not get sucked into their garbage. If you're hanging around someone who says they're a Christian and yet they have ungodly characteristics that are all over, not just a minor problem here or there, because everyone's got minor problems, but someone who will try to talk you into doing things that would violate your conscience and your understanding of God, those are the people that you need to watch out for. People who try to talk you out of the miraculous, those are the people. Denies its power. God is a miracle worker. And if you read the scripture honestly, you cannot but draw that conclusion. And so you have to say, if someone's trying to talk you out of miracles or signs or wonders, you have to, the apostolic area was full of them, but it never ended. Miracles, signs, and wonders have continued down to the present age. Goodness, the Roman Catholic Church has a whole department cataloging that sort of stuff. And it's stuff that can't be explained away. God is involved in our lives, doing things. And if people deny that, he says, stay away from them because they're denying God's power, and that's going to eventually impact you, and it's going to mess you up. Okay, 1 Peter 4:7 says the same thing about the bad people, but now here's our response. He says, but the conclusion of all things is near. Therefore, use good sense and be clear-headed so that you can pray. Okay, we're at the conclusion of the age, the end of the age. The goal of the age is, by the way, how you could also translate it, because everything's headed toward the goal of Jesus coming again. That's the goal of the age. We're headed there. And so because of that, use good sense and be clear-headed. Use good sense. Think about that. What does that mean? Well, it means use good sense. Don't. There are so many ways you can get scammed and fleeced today. Use good sense. Okay, just use good sense. If you use good sense and don't let greed come in, often you'll just be able to walk away from any scam that's out there because you don't let greed come in. You aren't naive enough to believe that every email you get. In fact, by the way, I never respond to emails. If someone says your account is overdrawn or blah 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 blah, it doesn't matter how official it is. I go log into the website directly because you can't trust any emails, none. So don't ever do that, okay? Because you will end up regretting it. As they scam your identity and all that sort of stuff. But so use good sense. We live in a world, if you know that we're in the end of the age, and you know that a whole list of things applies to people around you who don't know the Lord, and maybe some who do, you use good sense. You make sure that you are wise in how you live your life, and you don't get crazy. You use good sense. One of the things that a lot of people in Florida aren't using good sense right now because we have what is now called constitutional carry. That means people can carry a firearm without any permit or anything. In the past, you had to have a modicum of training, and I don't think it's good sense for anyone to carry a firearm if they haven't had a level of training. Because you have the ability with a firearm to end someone's life and to destroy yours. Okay, that's the bottom line. And so you need to know the laws to understand what is a fear of dire bodily harm. Because if you don't know that, if you haven't been trained in that, you could make a mess out of someone's life and yours. And so it's so important. If you're going to do stuff with a level of with great power comes great responsibility. Okay, to borrow a quote from Spider-Man. That is really the truth. With great power comes great responsibility. So make sure that you use good sense in this particular area. That's just one of the things that came to mind. There's so many other applications. Use good sense. Don't get mad at someone in traffic and bump their bumper. That's not going to end well. Okay, stay clear-headed. No fear or panic. Okay, clear-headed. If you get fear or panic, it's hard to stay clear-headed. There was We Were Soldiers Then and Young. Remember that movie? Again, a movie I'm not sure I'd recommend because it's pretty violent. But the commander that Mel Gibson plays in that movie, I forget his name in because this guy's a real guy, Colonel Moore. And he was brought up on charges because they heard repeatedly, as they were doing the after action reports, they heard that he was asleep on a termite mound. They're big termite mounds in Southeast Asia. And so anyway, he was brought before his inquisition because he was really up for court-martial. Sleeping on the job in the middle of this major attack is a big deal when you're the one who's in charge. And so he said, no, I wasn't sleeping. I was trying to get clarity, clear-headed. And I was saying, what's happening? What's not happening? And what can I do about it? And those right now are a part of the training manual of the military because they're such brilliant questions. What's happening? Get clarity on it. What's not happening? And what can I do about it? And that's really, that applies to life. When you, oh my goodness, what's going on? What's happening? Calm down. What's happening? What's not happening? I'm still breathing. Now, what can I do about whatever circumstance or stress that is there? And if the answer is nothing but call 911, call 911. Okay? Stay clear-headed. And this is also that you pray effectively. It's hard to pray effectively when you're in a panic because that's not faith. You have to pray with faith. And so you don't want to pray in a panic. Above everything else, above everything, have sincere love for each other, for love conceals a great number of sins. Okay? Can you imagine out of all the things that he could say to us right now as the end times approach? He said, what's the number one thing that needs to be going on in your life? You need to have sincere love for one another. That's amazing. Okay, willing to sacrifice on behalf fellow Christians. And then he said, that type of love conceals a great number of sins. Now, there's a couple of different ways to look at that phrase and to say, our sins are theirs. Yes. When there's a question, when it's either an objective or subjective genitive phrase like that, it's yes. Why? Because it's both pretty good. I'd like the idea that if I'm loving someone, the Lord's saying, that's going to take care of a lot of your negative character qualities. That's really what that would mean. It's going to mean that trumps your negative character qualities. And that's going to be what people remember and not your less lovely character qualities. But also, my love for them will help me conceal their sins. Not to hold them up to the light. Not to say, I'd help them, but you know what? They've got this issue in their life. That's not what we want to be focused on. Love covers a multitude of sins. Love conceals. And 1 Peter 4:8, we already said that. Love conceals a great number of sins. There we go. That Proverbs passage I didn't read, but you could have read that. If you didn't, let's put the Proverbs passage up because it says exactly that. Hatred awakens controversies, but love covers over all sins. That's the quote. That's what he was quoting. Okay. And then finally, verses 9 to 10. Be hospitable to one another without complaining. To the degree that each one of you has received a grace gift, serve one another with them as good managers of the various kinds of God's grace. Be hospitable without complaint. Wow. By the way, if some of the bad things that are going to happen, that we think are going to happen, it means that there's going to be people who are going to be kind of refugees away from areas that are being impacted negatively. And we might have to be people who are saying, hey, I need to be able to help as many people out as I can. Today I had to go to a house because unfortunately, as I've already told you, that someone who has attended this church passed away. And I had to go and talk to the widow. And it was really a great comfort to me that I was able to say to Dawn, find 2 of our ladies who can come out here and stay with her as long as they need. They can practice hospitality. That's what that is. That's hospitality. That's helping someone, encouraging them, comforting them, helping them through, and being able to do so and say, that's what I'm here for. Okay, that was really a good deal that I was able to do that. Use the gifts that you have been given. That's what he's saying. Everyone's got a gift. Use the gift. If you don't know what your gift is, find it. That God has given and given you supernatural authority in that gift. But use that gift. Serve one another with those gifts as good managers of the various kinds of God's grace. And then this just finishes it up. If someone speaks, let him speak as one speaking the revelations of God. If someone serves, let him do so as one serving by the strength that God supplies, in order that God may be glorified in all things through Jesus Christ, to whom is the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen. Speak with the authority that God gives. When I get up here and I say, God told me this or God gave me this revelation, I speak with authority. The reason I do is because I've got a command to do that. Okay? That's a command given to God's people. You can say whatever you want, but that's a command. Okay? Let him speak as one speaking the revelation of God. If someone serves, just in other words, when you know that God has given you something, you don't get up and say, well, maybe. You give it at the level God gave it to you. Now, if God just gave it to you as an impression, then you can say, well, I had this impression, and it could mean this, whatever. But anyway, if you know that it's a word from the Lord, you give it as a word from the Lord so that God can be glorified in all things. We're always giving him the glory. You give it with God's strength, and so that Jesus might be glorified in all things, in our words and in our actions. That's the goal. So how do we live? Well, we recognize what the world's going to be like. That's what we did in the first half of this message. We realize, well, we probably shouldn't live that way. And then we've been told how we're supposed to live in the second part of this message. And it's a different value system. It's a different way of approaching stress. It's a different way of approaching the world that is falling apart in which we are living. And we got to realize, you know what? We could have an election where our favorite candidate is elected in November, and unless we are still in a place of peace, every twist and turn along the way is going to tie us in knots. Okay? And we just got to be clear-headed, self-controlled, at peace, no matter what comes down the pike. We are privileged to live in these days. This is a time when all the saints throughout world history had hoped that they would be alive. We're the ones that get to be there. We have answered the call. What call was that? The one where someone said, may you live in interesting times. Because these will be the most interesting times that have ever been in history. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity today to now look, after having last week's message confirmed by our apostolic head, I ask that you now would help us to be able to prepare ourselves as those who understand the times in which we live and those who know what to do about it. In your name, amen.